Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. This is Michiel, Beautiful Bean Juice. So today we'll be talking about the Cocinare Flow Kettle, which is the kettle I have right here. So this is a temperature controlled pour over kettle, kind of similar to the fellow Stag, which I guess is the most famous example of this. It's produced by a brand called Cocinare. And it's a kettle that I don't see many people talking about, and I think with this review I kind of want to change that. Full disclosure, I did get this kettle for free, so the Cocinare sent me this kettle in order to review it. I will not change my opinion, or they will not be able to see anything that I will say about this kettle until the review is posted, so they won't have any say in what I say about it. And I'll try to be as honest and transparent as possible. But I just want to make sure that people are aware that this kettle was sent to me for free. Okay, so let's get started. So this is the Cocinare Flow Kettle. It comes in several colors. I quite like the black one that I got. It's fully made of stainless steel except for one little part, so the inside, try to show it, is fully stainless steel. Not sure how well you get to see that. The lid mostly consists of stainless steel, but the top is actually made of plastic, so that's a bit of a disappointment. But in my old kettle, actually the top, the entire lid is made of plastic, even the inside, so this is already a big improvement for me. Additionally, there's the base, which is also made out of plastic, but it's quite a high quality material and it feels very well made. So today in this review, I'll be showing you how does it work, how does it function, how does it pour. I will be brewing two different recipes, one Osmotic Flow, which is a very slow pouring recipe, and one MK dripper recipe, which actually requires a very quick pour, just to kind of see both sides of the spectrum. Can it handle slow pours? Can it handle quick pours? And I'll be closing off with some pros and cons and my conclusion. I have done some temperature testing, but I won't be doing that in the video. I'll just include that in the pros and cons part. So let's get started. So I will show you how the kettle works. So this button is to turn it on and off. Short tap to start it to boil and turn the boil back off. If you want to completely turn it off, to keep pressing it. If you then want to turn it back on, just a quick press. If you want to change the temperature, you can do that by turning this knob. I typically only set it in around the 90 to 100 range. My girlfriend sometimes sets it to 60 because she likes to drink hot water. It will go as low as 38, but I've never really been able to use that. I've never really needed to use that. But so it's good to know that it can go there. There's this cycle button which can switch between Fahrenheit and Celsius. Because I'm based in Europe, I use the kettle in Celsius. This is a timer function, which I don't really personally use. But if you, for example, brew tea, you might be able to track how much time has elapsed since you put the tea into the water. I think for coffee brewing, because we use a scale, it doesn't really make sense to use the timer because the timer would be on your scale. And if you don't have a scale, I'd probably invest in a scale before I would invest in a pour over kettle. Additionally, there's the hold function, which is very helpful. So the hold function will help keep the water at the set temperature. This works at every temperature except for boiling. So when you set it to boiling to 100 degrees, what will happen is it will keep the water hot at 97 degrees. I assume this is a safety function, but I'm not entirely sure. But so that's a bit of a downside. So those are the controls. That's it. It's a very simple kettle to use. I quite like using it. I will see you when I'm brewing the coffee. Okay, so I'll be starting the Osmotic Flow recipe. So this is the bloom phase. So I'll be showing you how I pour. So this recipe is based on a video by the coffee chronicler requires very slow pouring, starting with circular pours and finishing in the center pour. So I'm using the Americano dripper. I haven't posted anything on this yet, but I'll be doing a full review on it. It's very similar to a V60, so there's actually a V60 recipe. So you can see it can pour quite slowly. I'm trying to really push it in terms of how slow it pours. Sometimes it will stop a bit because I'm trying to push it too far, but it will comfortably pour this slow. I'm also just sometimes stopping on purpose because I want to keep the bed level. I'm going to brew up to 250. It's actually quite a strange recipe, but I found I can get quite good results. Because of all the center pouring, the bed doesn't always look that good. The coffee usually tastes quite delicious. Trying to perfectly hit that 250, but stopping a bit too early. Okay, there it is. I'll give it a little swirl just to level the bed, which isn't really in the recipe, I think, but just something I like to do. Okay, so I'll let this roll down and I'll see you in the next recipe. So this recipe is actually a recipe created by the Danish barista champion, together with Hans Hedrick. He has a video about it called Brewing Like a World Champion. I'll link that in the description. And this recipe requires very quick pours. So, and it also has the reverse flat filter to draw very, very quickly. So I just want to test, if the kettle can handle these quick circular pours. It's able to handle them very well. There's no swirling in this recipe because essentially this was made for a barista competition, and if you're swirling consistently, that will deduct points in the barista competition, so therefore there's only pouring, so all the agitation needs to come from pouring, which is why this is such an agitation heavy recipe in terms of pours. I think I ground a little bit, 2 pours. So that's it for this recipe. As you can see, the kettle handles these pours very, very easily. No problems at all. I just let it draw down. Then I'll be back with my conclusions and the pros and cons. Okay, so let's start with the pros and cons of this kettle. So let's start with the pros. So I think it's a very nice looking and very well built kettle. So, and it's, like I said, it's mostly stainless steel except for the top part of the lid. It feels very nice. The handle is quite comfortable to hold when you're pouring. I like the base. I like how the base operates. I think it's very simple to operate this kettle. You know, you're just turning the dial to change the settings. It's never finicky. It's always very easy to use. You can use it with wet hands and it's fine. I haven't had many problems with it. I think it's very easy to operate. I think that's great. Additionally, I did some temperature testing and I didn't include it in the video because my temperature probe is from AliExpress and it isn't super reliable. But from what I could test with it, the temperatures of the kettle are very consistent and they are always within kind of the margin range of my temperature probe. So I would say there's no issues there. So that's something, especially the consistency is very important because you want to make sure that every time you pour a recipe that it ends up at the same temperature. Additionally, I really like having temperature control. So I didn't have this, I didn't have the option of temperature control before, but I've actually found that I really like having it and that I use it a lot more than I thought, especially when I brew anaerobic or natural, very processed beans. I like to drop the temperature a little bit, and when I brew decaf especially as well. So even though I used to kind of prescribe to the whole boiling water is always best approach that James Hoffmann preaches, I don't really agree with that anymore, and I actually do use the temperature controls quite a lot. Also when brewing with the Cocinare, because the Cocinare holds a lot of heat, so I always like to drop the temperature a little bit there as well. I like the way it pours. I think the kettle pours well both at high and low speeds. There's a restriction on how quickly it can pour, but I've never experienced that stopping me during a recipe. I think if you're trying to pour a huge glass of water and you just want to pour it as quickly as possible, that gets slightly annoying with this kettle sometimes because of that restriction. But in terms of recipe pouring, even the quickest recipes, I've never had any issues with the flow. Actually, I really like it. And in terms of pouring slowly, my old kettle, the water would really run up the spout, so it would at some point it would just stop pouring down, and the water would just run up the spout, and it would get everywhere, and it would become a huge mess. And this kettle, you can pour very slowly, and at some point it would just stop pouring. There will be just no water coming out, but that's at a very low pour speed, which I rarely use. And sometimes, especially with Osmotic Flow, like you probably saw in the video, it will stop a little bit because I'm trying to pour that slowly, but I haven't had any other experiences with other kettles. So my previous kettle was much worse, and also when I use the Hario Buono, I have that same experience. So that's more about how I pour than about the kettle specifically. There's some downsides. One downside for me is the beeping. So when the kettle finishes boiling, it beeps 3 times, like beep, 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 which is not my favorite thing. Whenever you interact with the kettle, you turn it on, turn it off, it will make a beeping sound. It's something I'm not a huge fan of, and I wish you could turn it off. Maybe there is a possibility to turn it off, but I haven't found it, which it's just a bit of a disadvantage, and if you're very sensitive to that, it's something to take into account. Another thing I like less is that the minimum fill line is very unclear, so I'll try to show you. There's like the maximum fill there, and there's a little line underneath. That is the minimum fill line. So on my old kettle, you had this little window where you could see from the outside where the min and the max fill line was, and it was much more convenient, but it's not a big issue for me personally, but just something to be aware of. Also, the minimum fill is 500 mils. So if you want to boil less water, the temperature will probably be less accurate. I didn't measure this, so I cannot be entirely sure, but I'm assuming they gave it a minimum for a reason. Another thing I like less is that the hold function will only hold at 97 degrees if you set it to boiling. I assume this is for safety reasons, because otherwise it will boil dry. It will just keep boiling, boiling, boiling. But still it can be quite annoying, especially when I'm brewing with my robot. So my robot, I really want to have the highest possible temperature. So whenever it finishes and I set it to the hold function, even though I really like the hold function in general, it is quite annoying when it has already kind of cooled down to 97 degrees and I have to hit boil again exactly when I already am ready to pour. So it's a bit unfortunate in terms of timing sometimes, but I understand that that's a safety measure and it's something that they chose to do this way. But personally, I would have preferred if it just kept it at 100, especially because usually I don't need it to hold it at 100 that long, only for a couple of minutes, but Yeah, I understand. One other disadvantage might be the price. It's not a cheap kettle. It's significantly more expensive than my previous kettle, but like I said, that didn't have temperature control. I think it's worth the price. I think the price makes sense. It's a very well built kettle. I really like the design. I think it's a beautiful kettle. It pours well. It is well constructed, and it just works well. It's just a nice kettle to work with on a daily basis. It doesn't annoy me. So, do I think this kettle is worth getting? It's hard to say. I really like this kettle. I like the way it works. I think it's mostly a great product, minus the minor things I just mentioned. But because I haven't been able to compare it to stuff like the Stag EKG or other kind of big pour-over kettles, I've compared it to the Hario Bono, and I personally prefer how this one pours over the Bono, but I haven't used the Bono that much, so take that with a grain of salt. So, but like I haven't been able to compare it to enough other kettles to say this is the pour-over kettle, you must get this one. But what I will say is it's definitely a good option. I like how it pours. I think the design is nice, and if you can get it for a good price, I definitely think it is worth getting. Speaking of getting it for a good price, I will post an affiliate link. So this, if you use this link, this will help my channel. I want to be very transparent about that. And I will add a discount code that you can use to buy one of these if you're interested. So did I cover everything you wanted? Is there anything I missed? Do you have one of these? What do you think? Let me know in the comments below, and have a beautiful day. Thanks so much for watching.